In the early 2000s, punting was beginning to stagnate. Back in the 70s, people truly started to realize how important punting the ball was, and position players were handing off the roles of kicking a football to guys whose one job it was to kick. The first wave of punters broke football beyond what people could believe, and the names of guys like Ray Guy still live on in legend, as he was able to completely flip fields and pin back opponents. And with the rise of great punters came the rise of great punt returners. This would become the internal struggle of kicking a football, as we tried to figure out how to not have it returned back to us. Stylistically, we were kicking a type of punt called the spiral. It was and still is the premium and most optimal way to get good distance and good hang time. It's the most aerodynamic flight path, it gets the most pop due to where you're contacting the football, and if hit perfectly, the way it falls provides the greatest resistance to maximize hang time. There's just one problem, and that's that it may actually be one of the hardest things to do in sports. And I still want to give that topic its own video, but just the precision required to hit a good spiral, the complex compound body movement takes to optimize it, the time constraint you're under, and the variability of the snap, and harsh consequences of what happens if you mess up, either just missing your spot on the ball a little bit, moving too slow and getting your ACL snapped, makes hitting a spiral truly an accomplishment in a game. But there's another layer to hitting a spiral, and that's just how variable it can be. If you make contact a little bit too low, now instead of hitting a nice 50-yard, 4.8-second fair catch, you just hit a 52 4.3 house call. Oh, did you drop it a half-inch inside? Guess what? Instead of that 55.49 to the NFL numbers, now it's a 47.42 down the middle. Oh, your long snapper threw it a little bit high and you had trouble adjusting? Guess what? You just hit a 2.9 to Deshaun Jackson with the game on the line. Enjoy retirement, buddy. So ultimately, the combination of variables made hitting a spiral hard, yes, but made keeping your net punt high even harder. I mean, Ray Guy's best year for net punt was 36.3 yards in 1986, with the best net punt that year going to the legendary Reggie Roby with 37.4. 15 years later though, and the best net punt was only a little over a yard higher, showing how slow punting was advancing in 2001, because we were beginning to reach a breaking point. Kicking the ball further was simply not getting us better field position, and on top of that, touchbacks were soaring because as our legs were getting stronger and we could hit balls further, it made punting from inside the 50 a nightmare without punters really having a great strategy for it. But if you jump forward another 15 years, the best net punt is an unbelievable 46 yards, 9 yards further than what it was in the early 2000s, something that some would find completely unimaginable, in fact, in 2001. The touchbacks were down across the board, and our lowest average that year would have probably led the respective division from 2 decades ago. And the biggest game-changing factor comes from one tiny little Australian invention known as the drop punt, and it might just be one of the most important things ever brought to the game of American football. But to talk to you a little bit more about it, I brought in a real...
I can almost do it like eyes closed, whereas spiral, you've got to be really quite precise.
Tried and true drop punt specialist.
Yeah, so Josh Grouden, I obviously from Australia and punted at LSU.
Josh Groden now to punt this time. He's there inside the 20 specialist, if you will. End over end kick. 5, and it's down at the 4. Can't do it any better than that.
And then transferred to West Virginia for my final year.
Josh Groden punted away. Lets it go over his head, and it's down at about the 6-yard line.
COVID happened, moved back to Australia. Well, I started coaching for Pro Kick Australia, and then now, still kind of affiliated with them, but also do coaching as like the kicking consultant, more for like strength and conditioning, strength and power. So a drop punt is essentially hitting close to the point of the ball, so then it can spin backwards, traveling in our sport 15 to 20 meters accurately, or up to 50 to 60 meters accurately. The way we pass the ball in Australian rules football, so you can't throw it, you can handball it, but the most predominant way is by kicking it. It's like soccer in that you want to maintain possession of the ball. So you need to be accurate, you need to be consistent, and the easiest way to do that is by hitting the backspin on the ball, so we can get to our teammates accurately, and so then they can catch it and maintain possession. And then then goes into the way that we score points. We have to kick it through the goals. The beauty of the drop punt for American football is that you can be accurate, and that you can have that touch on the ball to pin the opponent's deep, right? So where you don't want to blast it through the end zone, you can get that backspin on the ball, a bit more touch, finesse, lands, and then either we get that backspin so it doesn't go forward, or it's just really easy. Going back to Australian football, it's easy for your teammates to catch. So your gunners can often get down there and catch the ball. It's more predictable in the air and after the bounce of where it's going. And then also when you look at like open field drop punts, like getting the ball outside the numbers or like on the sideline away from the returner is just so effective, right? So it's just a really easy way to be accurate with where you put the ball.
So this style of punt just answers so many problems that punters had been developing. The first and most obvious one is the close range punts, or punts where the ball is on the opposite side of the 50. And while many think that this ball is the best because of its backspin and potential to take a favorable bounce, for those who punt, you realize it's actually not that much more likely to take a good bounce than a spiral, and the real benefit comes from control. Variability ball to ball is significantly lower on this, and it's so much easier to place, because even if you're trying to hit a shorter spiral, you can accidentally make contact too low and oops, now it's 10 deep in the end zone. The number one thing I teach young guys when it's hitting a drop punt is you pretty much can't hit it hard enough. When I was hitting this in college, it was a weapon. NFL punters that use it like a weapon, and you hardly ever see a drop punt just sail straight into the end zone, which could not be said about hitting spirals back in the day. And Australian punters obviously hit it with the fluidity of a dancer, and it's completely changed how we even tackle this portion of the field. And like I said, if you look back at the career touchback leaders, almost all of them came from the spiral boom from the 1980s to the early 2000s, and I doubt anybody who started punting in the NFL past 2010 is ever going to make that list because of the drop punt becoming just a complete and total do-over to that portion of the field. NFL punters also, most importantly, have begun to use it in the open field in general when facing down great returners, and two punters that use it almost every time are guys like Rigoberto Sanchez of the Colts and Ethan Evans of the Rams, and it's been an absolute house for them. The ability to not ever have to worry about hitting your worst punt is the safety blanket that NFL punters have been looking for years, as well as not out-kicking your coverage. The ability to always hit like a 45-yard punt with 4.4 to 4.6 seconds of hang has been paramount, and if you wonder if it actually works that well, just look at the Rams. Last year, they had punts returned for touchdowns on them twice, with one of the lowest net punts on the year, mostly just due to coverage because Ethan was still hitting the ball well. But his coaches had him switch up his style, so now he pretty much only hits drop punts, and it's been insane because he's lost 3 yards to his gross punt, but almost gained all 3 of those back in the net punt, which is one of the craziest transformations you can do. But it's not just a way to reduce returns, but it also wind-proofs punters. For those of you who don't know much about punting, you might think our biggest opposition are the people trying to block us or the guys trying to return it. But it's neither of those things. It is the weather. That's why the 3 most prominent all-pro punters for the last 5 or 6 years have all played in domes because of how much easier it is to hit a spiral there. But when you have a drop punt, it becomes much easier to hit. There's less likely that you're going to miss-hit it due to the wind, and you feel more comfortable just swinging away at it. So all in all, what the drop punt did wasn't raise the ceiling for what a punter could do, because we were able to consistently do that over the years, and there's nobody that's going to hit a drop punt higher and further than they would hit a spiral. But it did something for us that we've been looking for forever, which was if our bodies are hurting or we couldn't just find our best ball, it was able to guarantee us a 45-yard average by swinging as hard as we can. It was the equivalent of giving us a check down or a safety net that every high-level punter has been looking for, and it has done wonders. It raised our floor and gave us a new bare minimum that we could always get. So who would have thought that all the problems punters were having over the years could be fixed by a type of punt that was as common as the cold in the land down under, and is the biggest reason why punting has significantly jumped forward decades in just a few years.
Johnston hits it end over end. It will check up and down inside the 5.